On behalf of the Global Alliance for Public Relations and Communication Management, it is my honor and pleasure as chair of this year's Global Education Training and Development Month, a warm welcome you to our kickoff webinar. So each April, the Global Alliance brings together educators, professionals, and communication leaders from across the world to share knowledge, strengthen capabilities, and help shape the future of our profession. And this year's theme, Future Ready by Practice, is especially timely. As trust becomes more fragile and AI continues to reshape the way we learn, work, and communicate, we must prepare professionals who are ready to think critically, act responsibly, and create meaningful impact. I am also delighted to share that we have received around 800 registrations for this webinar, and that reflects the strong global interest in this important conversation. But before we begin today's discussion, allow me to take this opportunity to invite you to continue this journey with us at our Cap Off webinar on 30 April. And today's session focuses on what we must teach now. And the Cap Off webinar will take it further into what works now in practice. So, together, these two sessions are designed to connect education and industry, ensuring what we teach is aligned with what the profession truly needs. And that session will be a practitioner led discussion, bringing together global industry leaders, CEOs, senior consultants, decision makers, and professional development leaders at the forefront of industry change. We will share real world insights on how the profession is evolving, how organizations are upskilling for the future, and how leadership must respond responsibly in an AI driven era. Moderated by Ms. Ana Pista, a highly seasoned PR and communication leader. The session will bring a more provocative and practice driven conversation guided by Gartner's prediction on the future of PR, particularly the growing role of AI and the expected rise in the PR investment. So join us again on 30 April. And now, to guide us through today's discussion, it is my great pleasure to introduce our moderator, Mr. Norman Agatep. He is the Vice President for Internal Affairs of the Public Relations Society of the Philippines and the Chairman and CEO of Grupo Agatep, one of the country's leading integrated marketing and corporate communication agencies. A highly respected communication leader, he brings deep expertise in strategic communication, reputation management, and corporate affairs. He is also an educator, sharing his expertise with the academe and helping shape the next generation of communication professionals. His work reflects the strong connection between industry practice, professional standards, and education. Norman, thank you very much for being with us. I give you now the screen.
Thank you very much, Giselle. I greet everyone here from the Philippines and thank you for joining us from different parts of the world. So, welcome to the Global Alliance Education Training and Development Month 2026. And tonight we have our kickoff webinar. Our topic today is What We must Teach Now, Future Ready PR and Communication Skills for the AI Era. This discussion, as we all realize, is both timely and urgent. Why? Because communication is evolving so rapidly. AI is changing how we create, analyze, respond, and engage. At the same time, trust is becoming harder to build, and expectations around ethics, accountability, and measurable impact are becoming stronger. So, the question before us is not simply whether the profession is changing, the question is whether our curriculum, teaching approaches, and learning priorities are evolving fast enough to prepare students for the realities that they will soon face. We are privileged to hear today from five distinguished speakers from across regions, each bringing a unique perspective on what communication education must become in this changing environment. So let us begin with our first speaker. Our first speaker comes from the United Kingdom. She is Professor Emeritus of Corporate Communication at the University of Huddersfield and is internationally recognized as one of the leading scholars in public relations and corporate communication. Her work has had significant influence on professional capability frameworks, communication leadership, governance, ethics, and the relationship between education and practice. Over the years, she has contributed greatly to shaping how communication is taught, evaluated, and aligned with the real demands of the profession. We are honored to have with us today Professor Anne Gregory from the UK. Professor Anne, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed for that very important and flattering introduction, Norman. I'm grateful to be with you today. So it's an important introduction because it means that academics need to be a part of this discussion about the future of PR and how we shape the profession of the future. So my task really is to set the context for this discussion. And I'm going to focus on how organizations and public relations are changing, and then move on to how we prepare the graduates and new entrants into the profession, and link this specifically to developments in AI. But I think it's important that we set it in context, because we're living in a polycritical age, and crisis piles on crisis. We seem to lurch from one issue to another at speed. And the issues that face us, whether that's political, social, or technological, are huge and pressing, whether it's climate change, geopolitics, economic uncertainty, social inequality, the list goes on and on. We often describe it as the VUCA or the BANI or even the tuna world that we're living in. And public relations has always been linked to these issues, because as a profession, our ambition and the ambition of those who enter our profession is to be that trusted advisor to senior management. And all the evidence is that as they try to make sense of this turbulent world, they are turning to their public relations advisors for guidance. And they want help. They want help to make sense of what's happening. They want help to navigate a way through these complexities. And they want help to engage with stakeholders in ways that builds trust and solid relationships with them. And all that within a massively turbulent environment. So how do you prepare young people for such a huge and important strategic role? And it does link very specifically to our topic today, because a lot of the conversations about the issues that I've just mentioned are mediated online. Some of them driven by AI bots, for example, and AI agents. So turning to the focus of our webinar, there is then the huge impact of AI on our profession. Specifically, it's revolutionary. And those entering the profession often start at the tactical level, doing the communication on behalf of organization, engaging with the nuts and bolts, if you like, of the operational elements of our field of work. And I contend that those entering the profession will need to fly at two levels. Understand that bigger picture about what they are going to contribute, as well as undertaking public relations in an increasingly AI-driven world. And the one without the other is really like having a car without a steering wheel. You need to understand that context. And I use the word an AI-driven world purposely, and it's impacting on public relations profoundly. And I'd say it's impacting on our context. So we know that we operate in a world that is full of mis and disinformation, declining trust, polarization, a lack of transparency, syntheticization of the online space, a lack of regulation and governance. And AI has moved from being an aid to content creation to being the first reader of what's online and the interpreter of what's online. And it really is a huge stakeholder in all we do. And then organizationally, AI is affecting all organizational architecture, as well as public relations departments. And there's 4 dimensions to that. And I'll just show you a little diagram that articulates this for us very quickly. So of this diagram here that you should be able to see now, you can see the 4 elements of organizational structure that AI is impacting. So it's affecting sort of the norms and organizational laws and guidelines, whether that's hard governance, which is transnational laws such as the European AI Act, soft governance like UNESCO's guidance on ethical public relations. It's moderating the norms of organizations. So, for example, in public relations, do we look to the Global Alliance's ethics codes to moderate our functional behavior? It's also affecting our identity as a group of people, the identity of public relations. What will it mean to be a public relations practitioner in the future? And we're going to have that role in governance. And we're going to have to move away from task driven being our focus, which has been for too many years. And we need to look at our skills like data literacy and analytics, etc., so that we can define ourselves and redefine our professional role in organizations. Then there's a bigger technology picture that organizations are beginning to grapple with. What does it mean to structure your tech and your organizational tech and commission the systems that you need ethically and know how they work? And then, of course, there's the workflow and the tasks and processes that we are involved in. So how do we organize our campaigns? What tasks are we going to defer to AI? And these 4 areas around people, technology, tasks and processes and structures all interact. And too long, we spent all our focus on that bottom right-hand corner instead of understanding what our role is in governance in the broader sphere of organizations. And our new entrants will need to understand the context in which they are going to operate in the future. And then functionally, AI is penetrating all areas of our research, from research, content creation, right through to evaluation. And it seems to me that we need to have a fundamental rethink about the shape of our profession as a whole. So along with the Global Alliance, I was privileged to lead a team that came up with the global capability framework for our profession. And this is it. And this capability framework scopes our profession, describes in just 11 statements what we do. And we've got communication capabilities, we contribute to organizations, and there's capabilities that we share with other professionals. And as part of that work, what we did in the AI sphere is to map these capabilities against the tasks that we typically undertake in public relations. And this is the picture that came out. And you needn't look at all the elements of this, because it's very obvious in the picture that in the area of communication, the nuts and bolts of what we do, AI has now fully permeated that sphere. And it is actually undertaking public relations work in content creation, etc., choosing channels, etc. And in that organizational sphere, it's also significant in underpinning our work, helping us with things like research, for example, and helping us by providing detailed analytics of what's going on. But in that professional area, you can see that AI has not permeated very much. And it's here, really, I think, that our opportunity lies around governance, about showing leadership in the organization, in the ethical and responsible use of AI. It's about demonstrating within the organization that there isn't just a task-based role for us, but there's a role for us in the broader organizational landscape, which can only be populated by us. So how do we prepare young professionals then at the entry level? And the challenge of job replacement, we know in that communication area, is very much real. Well, again, along with the CIPR, we did some work on looking at the analysis of AI adoption in terms of a SWOT analysis. And it shows us and sets for us really some of the educational agenda that we might have. So in the strengths of AI, we can see that new entrants will need to understand the tools that are required for AI so that they can increase their efficiency, and that so they can obtain access to data-driven insights and enhance their creativity. And it suggests that young professionals who master AI tools will be well positioned in organizations. But the strengths, the weaknesses and threats show us as well where public relations needs to step in, education around mis and disinformation, education around authenticity. Now, I wouldn't suggest that this is the whole education agenda, because it's not. And we need never forget that there's a lot of other things about the functional role of public relations, like planning, evaluation, stakeholder engagement, crisis, which also needs to be taught. But in relation to this webinar, I would suggest then that we should teach in practical terms things that prepare our new entrants for the future. So for that future advisory role, I would say that current affairs, technological innovation, problem framing, problem solving, understanding the nature of change, understanding the nature of society as it evolves, understanding the psychology of the modern world is crucially important. Creativity and human and machine collaboration, how to negotiate and navigate in this complex world, crucial skills for the future. And then there's the organizational AI human interface governance. What goes into those algorithms? Who's asking the questions about the AI systems that people will knock on the door of the public relations professionals to answer the questions about? And what about organizational AI systems and tools governance? What about the governance of our own tools? So in the AI-driven world that young practitioners will enter at that more tactical level, I would suggest that knowledge of tools and how to deal with constant innovation is a requirement. Knowledge of tasks in a predefined and redefined professional area, all within that bigger context. And PR is more than a series of tasks, of course. And then crucially, ethics and governance of AI systems will be a core proficiency for new entrants to the professions. Judgment and choice being crucial. Just because we can doesn't mean that we should. How to govern those tools, how to know how they're built and ask the questions about how they're built. The governance of content, tone, reach, nuance, potential bias, the potential to contribute to misinformation, and the governance of impacts on stakeholders and on the online sphere more generally. And all to underpin this, of course, deep teaching on ethics, accountability and responsibility. And those two things are quite different, of course. And critical evaluation skills. Turning to the types of pedagogy that we might use then, it seems to me then that scenario-based learning, simulations in real time, case learning, placements, and embedding the need for constant learning should be part of that curriculum development. And it points to a deep collaboration between academia and practice. So just in closing then, I'd say it's increasingly common to see job descriptions that have a significant part of the role to be done in collaboration with AI and AI agents. So we need to teach these new entrants not only how to work with AI, but how to lead and govern their use, ensuring that organizational communication remains responsible, inclusive and human-centered. Oh, and perhaps the biggest challenge for us is to teach students worldly wisdom. And I'm not quite sure how we do that, because a lot of this experience comes through gaining the scars of being in years of practice. And there's another question as well. What do we do about the digitally disenfranchised? And how do we make sure that they're included in the future? That's the topic of a whole new webinar, I'd suggest. Thank you very much indeed, Norman.
Thank you very much, Professor Anne. A very rich presentation and lots to absorb from your slides and great questions at the end of your presentation too. We will see you later on again, Professor Anne, when we do conduct our Q&A. And this is my opportunity to remind members of our audience tonight that if you do have questions, please jot them down for the moment and we will entertain them. If we do have time for all of them, why not? Just keep them handy later on when we do conduct our Q&A. So we now move on to our second speaker, who is from the United States. Our second speaker is the Gaylord Family Professor of Public Relations and Strategic Communication at the University of Oklahoma. She is internationally respected for her work on media transparency, information integrity, trust, and ethical communication. Her research has been highly influential in helping the field understand hidden influences in media, ethical decision making, and the broader relationship between communication and public trust. Her expertise is especially relevant in today's information environment where transparency and integrity are more important than ever. Today, we welcome from the United States Dr. Katerina Tsetura. Dr. Katerina, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Norman, for such a wonderful introduction. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone.
Did we lose Dr. Katerina, or is it just me?
I think we did.
Let's find out if she can join us quickly, rejoin us quickly. If not, we can move to our next speaker, but let's see.
There are
In the
already
meantime, again,
questions.
yeah. In the meantime, yeah, there are already questions. That's great. The others may follow suit and type in their questions in the Q&A box, and we will entertain them during our Q&A session after our speakers have shared their thoughts on our topic today.
Right,
Dr. Katrina, you're back.
yes, I am. As it happens when we talk about the most important things, right, we disappear. Well, let's continue on. Let's take a look at this Ipsos AI Monitor survey done in 2024, which actually asked people around the globe, how much do you agree or disagree with the following statements? And this was about artificial intelligence and whether it makes you nervous or whether it makes you excited. And when I look at this picture, I see some interesting trends here. First is that our world is very different in terms of how we perceive AI, right? And we can see that very excited people who say they are most excited about artificial intelligence tools are really concentrated in one particular area for the most part, and that is the area where the hosts of this webinar is. It's in Asia. And if we look a little closer at this survey monitor, we also can see that Indonesia leads this most optimistic countries with the benefits of AI technology. So that sets a really interesting tone for us of talking about all these aspects of how AI becomes not only part of our lives, but also part of our everyday activities and profession that Anne talked about, and really comes forefront of everything that, on the other end, our stakeholders want to see and are optimistic about. Now, as educator, my first question to this is, what does it mean for us from the public relations ethics? Several years ago, my colleagues and I have worked on various elements of what really constitutes public relations ethics. And I want to spend a little bit of time kind of focusing back on this very important concept on what it takes to do public relations ethically in the global world. Now, we know that there are four elements that we all teach in our public relations courses and seminars. We need to talk and address the dialogic nature of public relations, whether it is participation and listening and engagement. We need to talk about trust, the idea of the basic foundation for relationship building. We do need to also talk about the ways of how transparency, the expectations, in other words, that our stakeholders have, contribute to the success of what we do in public relations. And finally, technology. And with the rise of AI, what kinds of things get to be created, who orchestrates things, and who manages them. All of this needs to be driven by the understanding of how we think about public relations ethics. And ethics is the cornerstone of the decision-making at every step of the way. Now, my colleague and I, some years ago, developed this global model of what we call the holy triad in ethics to better understand the decision-making processes that happen in public relations and how public relations practitioners can navigate these decision-making processes ethically. And we looked at it from the global perspective. When I look at this model now, I realize that in the age of AI, it's very important for us to go back to basics and really think about how this model can guide our decision-making processes. So let me talk a little bit about how this model operates. The idea here is that every single decision that we have as professionals that we make in our professional practice is really driven by the three main values or factors that we have. It's the personal values, professional values, and environment values. And they all sit together in the circle of kind of factors that guide and contextualize the ways of how we think about what we do. And those are largely driven by our personal education, experiences, gender, and background, but also by our country-specific factors, such as political system in which we operate, economic system in which we operate, and sociocultural system. And so it's very important for us to realize that every single decision we make is not only about our personal values or only about professional values, but it really comes together in this, what we call the holy triad of professional, personal, and environment values. And environment, our country-specific or region-specific factors, can be just as important in making the decisions that we do as our professional values of public relations or personal values of public relations practitioners who participate in that decision-making. Now, when we have all these elements in balance, we have a perfect triangle and we can be in a very kind of nice state of mind, but a lot of times it does not happen. A lot of times one of the other values, one of the other factors really stretch our triangle. And as you can see in this picture, our decision-making really may be focused or forced to kind of be overweighted by one set of factors and values rather than the other. And in some situations, it may be personal values that really stretch and kind of take priority over the decision-making over others. Or environment values can take that priority, or sometimes professional values. And that is the interesting insight into how and why we make sometimes different decisions depending on where we work or depending on the context in which we work. Now, let's take this model and kind of think about how does this decision-making affect our day-to-day practices, specifically building trust in the practice. And whom do we really trust when we talk about trust? Now, if we look at another survey that recently has been done in 2025 about the share of adults who trust news media most of the time in selected countries, we can see some interesting results. I highlight a couple of things here for you. This is the trust toward news media. And if you look at Indonesia, for example, 2025 compared to 2024, we still have about just 1/3 of respondents who report that they trust news media most of the time. Just for your context, the United States is even lower than that, and the United Kingdom is also around 1/3 of that. But that result from the survey tells us that news media is not necessarily the most trusted element in this conversation. Now, if we look at another results of the survey from Oxford and Reuters recently on the proportion of adults who trust AI-generated search responses and that they've seen and information, we can see that there's a lot more trust toward this AI-generated tools, right? About 50% of all respondents in this particular survey said that they do trust AI-generated search. And you see that this percentage is even higher for younger adults and mid-age adults around the world. When I look at these results, I realize that a lot of times we also trust ourselves less and trust our AI more. And that's another interesting insight for us to think about and cogitate as we teach public relations in the 21st century. Finally, another survey just recently done in Indonesia by AJ Marketing shows that the daily usage of AI by activities for finding and summarizing information, for communication and work efficiency is really high. And that's no surprise, right? That you all know that, especially in the Asia Pacific region, we see a huge rise in utilization of AI services for a lot of important elements that we do in our practice: translations, summarizations, a lot of work efficiency elements, and of course, even environmental entertainment and creativity. But at the same time, we also know that AI assistants distort news. And if we don't trust news media and traditional media channels, and we trust more and more AI, we need to also remember and keep in mind, and also make sure that our students understand that AI agents a lot of times distort news information and may not necessarily do the double and triple check of information that we teach in traditional ways of thinking about information integrity. This is another recent study that BBC has done that shows that about 45% of all the information news that AI assistants generated had some flawed answers one way or the other. More problematically, 31% had sourcing problems, so the sources were not able to be traced, and 20% accuracy elements or accuracy issues were there. All of this leads me to believe that despite of the fact of how excited and interested we can be in AI and how widely spread AI is, we really need to go back to the idea of what we teach first and foremost. And I would argue that we need to focus on the decision-making process and help our students to really stop and think of how this process takes place. Ethics has always been and should always be the first and last word for us in terms of thinking about public relations education of the future. Understanding how decision-making from the personal, professional, and environment values, driven by the country-specific factors and the factors of our own upbringing, influences the way how we teach and how we do public relations. And the other thing that I would like for us to keep in mind as we take away some tips and suggestions for educational conversations with our students is that we cannot outsource conscious to code. We need to remember that our conscious, our decision making is the number one element that we want to keep as human beings. And that is the overarching capability that we have as public relations professionals. So I suggest we go back to this full circle, take a look at the decision-making processes where personal, professional, and environment values really drive our decisions. And whenever we decide to engage with utilization of AI tools or without utilization of AI tools as young professionals, we need to really think, how do we take into account why we make certain decisions, what drives those decisions, and how we can really do them to the best of the stakeholders. And only then we can talk about a fully capable public relations practitioners of the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Katerina. Wonderful slides. I particularly like your thoughts on the importance of discussing trust and ethics, and not only to be mesmerized by all the glitter of AI, and to really look into how we can teach students more about involving ethics in the decision-making process in utilizing AI. I'm sure many will be asking questions for you later on around that topic. So at this point, I would like to move on to our third speaker, who is literally a neighbor of mine in the sense that he is also from the Philippines. Our next speaker is from the Communication and Journalism Department of De La Salle University, Dasmariñas, in the Philippines. His work in communication education reflects strong engagement with teaching innovation, emerging learning frameworks, and the role of ethics, judgment, and human presence in an AI influenced educational environment. He brings an important perspective on how educators can remain grounded in what truly makes learning transformative while still responding to technological change. Ladies and gentlemen, let us please welcome Dr. Marco Polo. Dr. Marco, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Norman. A pleasant day to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be attending this webinar. I would first like to thank the Global Alliance for inviting me to join this very esteemed panel. I'm honored to be in the presence of many of the people that I read in the journals and who publish in the different disciplines related to PR. And for my presentation today, though it is centered on the educators, of course, I know that many of the attendees here are also students. But of course, in terms of the discussion of the topic, I would like to say that yes, the artificial intelligence revolution is already in our classrooms. So we need to do something, how to manage it. So my name is Marco Polo. Yes, I'm named like that explorer. But today I'm not here to discover new lands. I'm here to help us navigate something that's far more complex, which is teaching in the age of AI. Now, let me ask you, everyone in attendance here, how many of you, especially the teachers, have had a student who has already used AI even before you even assign the task to them? Well, that's what I thought. Now, here's the truth. As I mentioned, AI is already in our classrooms, and whether we invited it or not, it will continue to be utilized. So the real question is, are we teaching our students how to use it responsibly? So today, taking off from literature from UNESCO, also from my own research, and even from the landscape here in the Philippines, I want to share a simple but powerful framework that's through 6 principles and in one word. That word, I'd like to borrow it from the organization that invited me, is global. Okay? So let's look at each of these elements. So for G stands for ground. Ground in ethics and human values. Before any application, before any prompt, before any output, we must ask ourselves, what values are guiding our use of AI? In the Philippines, we talk about the value of kapwa, meaning our shared humanity, and also malasakit, which is our genuine care for others. These are not just cultural buzzwords. These are ethical anchors. UNESCO's AI competency framework says it clearly. AI must serve human dignity. So every AI-assisted assignment in our classrooms must begin with an ethics-first question. Who does this serve? Could this harm? Whose voices are missing? This will help us ground our students before they fly. So like what our previous speaker said, ethics first and ethics always. The second letter is L for literacy. Literacy first before you apply and then understand. I like to tell my students, you would not drive a car without knowing what the brake does, right? So why use an AI tool without understanding how it works? Students, and honestly, many of us educators too, need to understand that AI has its limitations. It has its biases and failure modes. Of course, we know that it hallucinates. It reflects the biases in its training data, especially because of those who designed these applications. It can sound confident and be compelling wrong, or be completely wrong, I mean. The conceptual understanding must come before the tool adoption. This is not about slowing down. This is about building the foundation so that when our students use AI, they do so wisely and not blindly. The next letter is O. O is for oversee. Oversee outputs with critical human judgment. Say it with me. AI generates, but humans decide. This is perhaps the most critical principle in communication education today. Our graduates will work in PR, journalism, advertising, public affairs, media production, etc. In all of these fields where credibility is everything. One unverified AI output that is published without review can destroy a reputation that's been built over the years. We must train our students to verify, fact check, and critically assess every AI output before it goes anywhere near an audience. In the UNESCO framework, this aligns with the evaluate competency. And in our classrooms, it means building habits of scrutiny, not compliance. We do not just accept the answer of AI. We must interrogate it. The next letter is B for build. Build disclosure and attribution habits. Transparency is not optional. It is now a professional obligation. Every AI attribution policy I have seen from global PR associations like the Public Relations Society of America, the Chartered Institute of PR in the UK, and even here in the Philippines, the Public Relations Society of the Philippines points to the same direction. You need to disclose your AI use. Even in my own university, that is what has been adopted as a policy. And yet, in many classrooms, unfortunately, we still treat this as a punishment rather than as a professional standard. Let us flip the script, my dear colleagues. When students cite their AI tools, just like they cite their references, we are not penalizing them. We are professionalizing them. Require proper AI attribution in student outputs. Normalize it, model it yourself, and watch how your students will develop the disclosure habits that future employers will thank you for. The next letter, second to the last, is align. Align AI tools to the learning outcomes. Here is a trap we must avoid, in which letting the tool drive the pedagogy. Just because an AI tool is exciting, it doesn't mean it belongs in your course, unless it serves your learning outcomes. My own framework, through my own research, called the Educating Framework, is built on one foundational principle: care before convenience. We do not adopt AI tools just because they are trendy. We adopt them because they genuinely help our students learn, grow, and become more responsible communicators. Link every AI activity explicitly to your course learning outcomes and also to the UNESCO competency levels. And in the Philippines, of course, to the Commission on Higher Education Standards. If you cannot make that link, the tool does not belong there as of yet. Finally, L is for lead. Lead a responsible AI culture in the classroom. To me, this is my favorite. It is deeply personal. The Educating Framework carries a signature line that I believe with everything I have as an educator through the years. As educators, be the most advanced technology in the room. It is not the AI. It is not the app. It is not the algorithm. It is you, the teacher. Your presence, your care, your intentionality as an educator, that is the most powerful pedagogical tool that no machine can replicate. When you model ethical AI use, when you demonstrate critical thinking, when you hold space for honest conversations about technology and its limitations, you are not just teaching a lesson, you are shaping a culture. And that culture of responsibility, of transparency, of human-centered learning is what will outlast every AI upgrade, every new model that is released, and every shiny new feature that is put out in the market. So my dear colleagues, in closing, as we open this Global Alliance webinar, I have this line to leave with all of you based on the acronym that I just shared. Ground your teaching in values. Build literacy before application. Oversee with human judgment. Build transparency habits. Align tools to the outcomes. And lead boldly, caringly, and humanly. The world does not need educators who fear AI. The world now needs educators who can guide their students through it with wisdom, with ethics, and with the irreplaceable human presence that no machine will ever replicate. Again, be the most advanced technology in the room. Thank you very much, and a pleasant day to everyone.
Thank you too, Dr. Marco, and thank you for sharing your framework, but also backing that up with a lot of practical tips that our members of our audience can take home with them tonight, and experiences that you've shared to flesh out what you mean by global. I'm sure we will be exploring more about your framework when we go to our Q&A later during this discussion. So for now, we will move on to our next speaker. From the Philippines, we now move to Romania, where our speaker is an associate professor at the Faculty of Journalism and Communication Sciences, University of Bucharest. Her work brings together communication, education, academic development, quality assurance, and the evolving influence of AI and media on teaching and learning. She has contributed to strengthening academic standards and institutional approaches in communication education, making her perspective especially valuable in discussions about relevance, quality, and future readiness. Our fourth speaker is Dr. Anca Anton from Romania. Dr. Anca, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for that very nice introduction, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this webinar. I appreciate very much the role that the Global Alliance gives to education. So because I'm talking about quality assurance and the role of quality assurance in future ready education, I would just like to start with let's say a personal story. So I came into contact with quality assurance actually quite early during college. I worked as the communication officer for the quality assurance office of the University of Bucharest, and I was actually part of the team involved in setting up the office and the quality management system, from philosophy to processes to procedures. So that gave me, I didn't know it at that time, but it gave me a first-hand view of how quality assurance in education is built and implemented in a large university. So that means that when we are talking about future-ready communication education, when I think about it, I naturally see it through a quality assurance lens. I didn't realize it at that point, but I realized it as I developed and advanced in academia. So I see a lot of the processes through this quality assurance lens, but also especially through a measurement lens. So what we do know now, and it's increasingly clear, is that education is expected to show real readiness, right? Not only course completion, not just, checking a box. And we are under this constant pressure to make learning outcomes visible, to show that graduates are prepared for practice. And that makes complete sense, right? But it also creates a quality assurance problem that it is linked to measurement, basically because bad measurement or bad understanding of measurement can actually distort that readiness. And that problem is that not everything that matters is easy to count, and not everything that is easy to count matters most, right? So for me, the question becomes, what counts as credible evidence of readiness? Right. So this is why I suggest using a simple quality assurance lens in evaluating graduate readiness. And the idea don't get me wrong, is not to create another checklist. We have enough of those, but it is to make readiness more explicit, to make it more visible, and also to help educators connect curriculum goals with very clear evidence of readiness in public relations and communication. Right, because at its best, quality assurance, I hope a lot of you are to some extent, familiar with the concept, is a way of monitoring, of evaluating, of improving educational quality. But in this context, it should not ask only what is taught. It should ask what students can demonstrate at the end of class, at the end of their education overall, right? And this is, I think, where a risk appears, right? So when you ask for evidence, there is always a risk. And in our case, the risk is that we might rely too much on what is easiest to measure, whether that is intuitive, or the reason is because it's intuitive, or it's accessible, or it reflects consensus at that point. So this is where I think the Cobra effect is useful to understand this whole concept. I came across this concept a few years ago, and it stuck with me. So the term comes actually from a colonial story from British India back a few centuries ago. So at some point, authorities had a problem with the cobras, and they offered a reward for dead cobras, right? And soon enough, people starting breeding cobras in order to get that reward, right? Authorities caught wind of that, and they stopped the program, the reward program. So what happened was that you had a lot of people suddenly having a lot of cobras on their hands and nothing to do with them. So what they did was release the cobras into the wild. The result was that the problem got worse, right? So the thing to take into account here is that when a system optimizes around the wrong measure, it can actually produce the wrong behavior. And I think that that is very relevant in education, particularly in the context of AI and of what we focus on, because that particular focus will mean that we might actually overmeasure some things, right? So for example, if we focus and overmeasure speed, right, we actually encourage superficial responses. If we focus on output, we may actually reward volume, and that volume might actually be delivered without the necessary judgment. If we focus on AI fluency, we may actually reward the delegation of thinking instead of human oversight, right? If we focus too much on brief compliance, we might actually miss the student's ability or lack of ability to question the brief itself, right? So what we measure shapes what students learn to optimize for. I think that is absolutely core for understanding our role as educators, right? Particularly because if that becomes a behavior, then that behavior can be then brought into practice, into the profession, and it can generate a whole mess, right? So I think this is the key quality assurance risk. If we rely too much on easy to measure indicators, we actually could end up measuring or validating the appearance of readiness rather than readiness itself, right? And I think that this matters even more in communication, because communication readiness is not just technical, and we've seen this in some of what my colleagues mentioned earlier, right? So when we are talking about technical aspects in communication, we're actually talking currently mostly about AI, and when we are talking about AI, we are talking about large language models. And these models are very strong with explicit tasks, with very structured and codifiable tasks, right? This is how they were trained. This is what they fed on our explicit knowledge, right? But we, as humans, know more than we can tell. And that's something important, because communication depends on things that are harder to formalize, on tacit knowledge, right? It comes from practice, it comes from judgment, it comes from context, it comes from questioning ourselves over and over again. And that is something that AI does not do, annoyingly so, keeps agreeing with us, right? So what I'm talking about is actually, in a very technical term, going back to Aristotle, it's phronesis, which is practical wisdom. I think that Anne referred to this as worldly wisdom. And this becomes relevant because it refers to the ability to make good judgments in concrete situations, right? So professional readiness includes more than what can be codified, what can be automated, right? It also includes judgment in context. And that is something we need to protect in both curriculum and in measurement. Right? No matter if AI is embedded or not in professional practice, AI is the current context, but it's not, the profession. And we need to be very careful with that, right? So when we are talking, or when I'm talking about this protection of judgment in context in curriculum, this is why I'm actually using this broader graduate readiness rubric. And I developed this actually because I am restructuring and reconfiguring my own courses, and I needed this type of framework across the courses, no matter the topic. Right? So this is actually something that I'm using now. So it includes these 4 dimensions: critical and strategic thinking, responsible AI use. So we had critical and strategic thinking before. This is a constant. Now we are talking about responsible AI use, of how we integrate it. The continuous evaluation, measurement, and self-reflection is the quality assurance component of it, and then alignment with professional standards, which kind of rounds it up. Right, so these are dimensions that can give a full picture of readiness, and this is right. The rubric basically becomes a quality assurance tool in itself, because it actually goes beyond these surface indicators like how fast or how well we use AI or develop campaigns, right? It also helps us to ask, can students make context sensitive judgments, right? Can they justify their choices? Can they reflect on limits, on their own limits? Can they use AI with oversight responsibly? There are a lot of questions that can be asked, and for me that is the value of the rubric, right? A set of criteria. It gives quality assurance a broader and more professional relevant basis to judge readiness for practice, right? So in this context, I would say that what becomes very relevant as the next move, as the next question, is how do we make this broader dimensions visible? And this is where the what if model becomes helpful. This is a model that was developed by Anna Adi and Thomas Tuchel, and it starts from some traditional evaluation and measurement frameworks, but it brings in a meta-modern approach to it. So what it does is it moves away from asking only one correct answer to one stable question, and instead it introduces like changing conditions, changing stakeholders, risks, consequences. It constantly asks, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if this changes? What if? And I think that this is much closer to actual professional communication, right? So this type of approach, this what if approach, actually can help us assess not only answers, which is traditionally what we assess, but judgment, right? And judgment under changing conditions. And once we do this, the rubric, the dimensions become more visible in practice. And we can see strategic thinking, we can see responsible AI use, we can see the reflection, we can see the professional standards, right? So for me, this is useful not only as a teaching approach, but it's also a quality assurance approach, because it helps make readiness visible without necessarily reducing it to simple metrics. And unfortunately, a lot of the times when we are talking about AI in practice, we do tend to look at the metrics, right? So just to conclude, because I think I'm a little bit over my time, I do think that in communication education, quality assurance should protect not only what is easy to measure, but what really matters, in professional readiness. And future-ready education does not only need measurement, but it also needs form of measurement and evaluation that do not flatten judgment, right? So these are just to wrap it up, these are the core ideas throughout my presentation. Of course, there are so many others, but from a quality assurance and measurement perspective, I think this could be some insights that I could offer. Thank you.
Wonderful, Dr. Anka. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on quality assurance. I was particularly intrigued with your statement on what we measure shapes what students optimize, and I believe there are already some questions in the Q&A box that already hint or want to explore that, or expand our discussion on that topic. So we will go back to you later on with the many questions. And again, I advise everyone, if anything that's been said so far has triggered anything in you and you'd like to explore that later on, please start typing your questions in the Q&A box and we will get to those questions as soon as our fifth speaker finishes. So having said that, allow me to introduce our next speaker. We move on to Nigeria this time, where our speaker is a highly respected communication leader with over 25 years of experience in public relations consultancy, crisis communication, governance, professional development, and capacity building. She is the CEO of NECCI Consulting and has played an important leadership role in advancing professional standards and mentoring within the communication field. Her perspective is especially valuable in helping us understand what practice experts from graduates today and how education and industry can work more closely together to prepare future ready professionals. Ladies and gentlemen, let's please welcome Dr. Nkechi Ali Balogun from Nigeria. Dr. Nkechi, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Norman. I could see you struggling to pronounce my name.
I know, right? But did I do it correctly though?
You tried. Okay. Thank you, Global, for giving me this opportunity to speak. Unfortunately, we don't have that much time. I don't know how much we can talk in 10, 20 minutes, but I'll try. So I'll be talking on the future ready PR, what the future expects. When I was preparing this lecture, I asked myself what exactly is different or has become different in the past 3 years. And reflecting now, I came up with a lot of surprises. 3 years ago, AI was something we read about. Today, I'm sure almost everybody in public relations, or let's say 9 to 10 professionals, are using it in their daily work, including myself. 3 years ago, AI was a novelty. I mean, deepfake was a novelty. It wasn't even in my own register. Today is a tool that bad actors, fraudsters use routinely to manufacture crises. 3 years ago, trust in business leaders was already fragile. Today, if you follow Elderman's trust barometer, you'll see that trust has fallen off the cliff down to 12 points in just 1 year. Nearly 7 in 10 people around the world now distrust the people leading their organizations. Trust is a thing PR has always traded in, and it has never been harder to earn or easier to lose. Information today is no longer a crisis event. It's a constant condition. And AI has arrived not just as a tool, but as something that is fundamentally reshaping how the work gets done and who does it. And that is why a lot of us, a lot of practitioners feel that AI will take over their jobs. I don't think so. Yes, of that change is what struck me. This is not a slow evolution. It's a profession being reshaped in real time. And the gap between what clients now need and what most teams are equipped to deliver is growing. And this is what we are going to talk about today. PR is at an inflection point. What worked before will not automatically work anymore going forward. Oh, sorry, Norman. Am I supposed to share my screen or you're sharing?
You may share your slides.
Oh, okay. I thought because I submitted it was going to be shared from there. Okay. Okay. Is my screen, is it showing?
You're good, Dr. Nkechi.
Thank you. So now take this down so I can. Okay, so the landscape is shifting. Let me put this in there.
Perfect.
Yeah. The landscape is shifting. The question is, I mean, you can see that 85% of PR tasks today are being augmented. By AI tools today. 4.7 times faster. I mean, people can generate AI in so much speed. Sorry, I think I'm having some issues here. Let me just quickly correct something. Okay. AI, 85% of PR tasks can be augmented or automated by AI tools. Not in 5 years. Today, drafting, media lists, monitoring, pitching, summarizing, press release, the core task lists that defined entry-level PR work for decades is already being transformed. AI communicators produce content 4.7 times faster than those working without AI. Think about it. Think about what this means for agencies. Think about what it means for their pricing. Think about what it means for their teams. Of course, teams will get smaller. However, speed alone isn't the goal. A wrong message produced 5 times faster is a wrong message. Just a faster mistake. This is exactly why the presentation argues that AI fluency is about orchestration. It's about judgment, not just using the tools. That's what a future-ready PR practitioner does with AI. We direct it, we shape the output, and take responsibility for the final results. So it's not just you pressing the tools. It's about the quality of the output. 72% of employers expect new hires to arrive, including myself, with foundational AI fluency. We are not looking for staff who want to come on the job anymore. You must arrive with it. You must arrive with those skills. And that means that you must be intentional in preparing for the future. So the question is no longer whether AI will change public relations. It already has. The question is whether we are teaching the right skills. Public relations in 2026 demands a new operational order, a new operational mindset, a new operational intentionality, one that pairs data precision with human judgment. Now, what does practice expect from us? Sorry. I think practice expects a lot from us, but there are core demands that every PR practitioner must actually be acquainted with. There are 3 things that would define the future-ready practitioner. They are the three things the market now expects from every PR practitioner. In the past, it used to be a senior level management skill. Now they are baseline. The first is AI fluency. So you are not just going to be clicking buttons, you'll be orchestrating AI, directing its output, knowing where it goes wrong, know where it goes right, know where, your own judgments must come in. And the second one is strategic thinking, strategies, moving from reactive monitoring to predicting reputation risk before it materializes. A lot of people are talking now, moving from search engine optimization to generative engine optimization. Well, if we have time, we can talk about that. What are the competency gaps? There are 6 structural problems in the professional profession today. I'm going to name them quickly because they are all connected. The first, of course, is the vanishing career ladder. AI does the entry-level work now, so junior staff never build the judgment that the old system developed naturally. Managers use the same tools to do work they once delegated. The mechanism that transfers tacit knowledge is designed from both ends. And then there's the agility gap. 33% of executives say their team is extremely agile. Only 14% of staff agree. That is a 2.4 times gap, and it does not close by itself. Of course, there is misinformation at machine speed. Deepfakes is getting on the increase, but amplified receipts are also there, up until 55% since 2029. So PR must become a discipline of verification. Of course, the third one is that leaders and frontline staff define success differently. While the executives want revenue, the in-house teams probably are recording and tracking brand awareness. And then, of course, there's a data literacy deficit. 44% of comms leaders cannot connect their PR metrics to business KPIs. And then the sixth problem, the competency gap, is the education industry mismatch. In a study in the US, studied about 83 US PR programs studied, the majority are not teaching the skills the market needs. These are not individual failures. They are structural problems. Here is what we must do. And we must do it fast. We must begin to look at partnerships. 4 things a future-ready PR partner, must do is to have PR partnerships. And this is what it will look like. First, we must invest in talent together. Move junior staff into strategic problem solving from day one, not drafting tasks, but real thinking. That is how we can rebuild the career ladder used to develop. Second, we must build AI governance now. Develop a clear ethical framework. Disclose AI use. Protect client data. Require human review of all AI output. Build AI competency at all levels, not just in specialist roles. This is non-negotiable. Third, we must agree on shared metrics, connect to business outcomes, not clips, not impressions. What moved the needle commercially? If you are measuring different things, you cannot have an honest conversation about whether the work is successful or is succeeding or not. Fourth, we must build rapid response capability before a crisis. That is very key. During one, we must have people that are pre-authorized, pre-cleared, and ready to respond to crisis. And here I will now end up by telling us what we can take away from today's presentation. But before then, I would emphasize that AI is a strategic advisor, partner, and not a vendor. It is also not the author. You are the author. We are the authors. AI should just be a partner. Finally, I'd like to, in concluding, here are the 5 things I want us to take away from today's presentation. The first is that PR is a credibility function, not a content function. Trust is now the primary strategic asset. It's moving faster than marketing. AI fluency is not optional. No, not optional in any way. But using tools is not the same as fluency. We must note this, that you are able to use a tool does not make you fluent in AI use. The value is in the orchestration of judgment. The value is in the orchestration of generate and the quality of what you are able to generate, the judgment you have been able to make, not in the generation of the content. The third one is the career ladder is broken. Rebuilding it requires deliberate redesign, supervised judgment from day one, not delegating drafting. Fourth, the alignment is a problem. Shared KPIs, real-time feedback loops, and measurement infrastructure, not culture change alone. Finally, education. We have emphasized so much on education today. Education and industry must close the gap together. Advisory boards, faculty partnerships, employer co-design programs. Both sides have to move. And I will end by saying that AI handles the speed. However, we provide the wisdom. Thank you very much.
Thank you also very much, Dr. Nkechi. Wonderful things to take away for our audience today. And thank you for sharing your thoughts specifically on the competency gaps and what we ought to be doing to close those gaps. At this point, as we finish already listening to the points of view of our 5 speakers, we would like to invite all of them to open their screens once again as we entertain questions from the audience and discuss and explore further the points they have risen. But before that, Giselle, I just like to confirm many of the people are asking to the Q&A box if they will be receiving copies of the presentations.
Will do. Will do. Yes.
Perfect. So everyone who has registered for this event will have access to those slides. Thank you very much, Giselle. Now, I'd really like to bring this conversation to, well, those were excellent frameworks, but I'd like to bring the conversation to practical things that the people in our audience can take home today and implement immediately starting next week when they go back to class. So my first question resonates with Shima's question in the Q&A box. My question is, name one skill that we're currently teaching that's becoming less valuable and one that is now very essential. That's I was trying to digest the questions in the box, and that's something that's resonating among many of the questions. What's a practical skill that we ought to be teaching now, and something that we ought to be teaching less, perhaps? Anyone can start.
I'll go first.
Okay.
Yes, Dr. Mark.
Well, since many of the questions I directed to me specifically, I've been trying to also respond to, but based on the general question you posed, Norman, an essential thing that still is part of the 21st century skill, I think, is still critical thinking, critical discernment. The UNESCO framework on AI competency is also connected to media and information literacy. So I think apart from teaching AI literacy, and AI proficiency, it's really responsible use of these tools are what is really most essential, I think. So to me, that's what is really a foundational concept and principle that must go into every subject, that we are teaching right now. It cannot just be for core subjects. In all subjects, it has to be revisited, it has to be reviewed, it has to be adapted, because the learning outcomes vary in the different subjects. But critical thinking will always remain as an important competency for me.
Right, and that's something echoed by many of the speakers today, regardless of the technology. In fact, maybe 5 years or 10 years from now, when the technology changes again, the ethics should remain and should be part of our discussion. Does anybody else want to weigh in on that matter?
Yes, maybe I can jump in. I think quite a lot of the mechanics, like, for example, channel selection, can be well automated. Excuse me, and some tools that are available are very sophisticated now. Excuse me, come back to me in a sec.
And just one thing, until Anne catches her breath.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure there is anything, we need to teach less. I think we just need to teach adapted versions, right? So if you look at anything related to media relations, right? It's not that we need to stop teaching media relations, it's just that we really need to adapt it to what media is now, right? And if you take it into, I don't know, traditional media to new channels, right, media environments, right, see it, everything that has to do with podcasting to, I don't know, influencer marketing, it changed a lot. And in a lot of cases, we see that media relations still is, taught around, I don't know, the press release. So we just need to adapt. It's not the end of the world or the end of the profession, but we do need to acknowledge what's happening in the transformations around us.
Thank you.
Very well said.
Filling in. So I think you're right. I was going to put a caveat on that, but we can't allow the oversight of that to be delegated, because what a lot of the automated tools will do is pick the optimum channels for you. You have to remember those who are hard to reach and who are disenfranchised, and we've got to make sure that we keep our profession and our communications fully rounded and inclusive. The thing that I think we need to teach more of is exactly that, governance. How do you ask those critical questions? So it's linked to critical thinking. I think absolutely agree with Marco on that. But it is, The Art of Humble Inquiry is the name of the book. I think that that's a crucial skill for us, increasingly crucial. Ask the questions, know what questions to ask, and don't stop asking the questions until you know. So I think that's a skill we ought to teach more and more of, critical inquiry as well as critical thinking.
Wonderful. Ask the questions.
I would also like to add something, because well, I don't know what happens in other places, but it's climb. We find that measurements, the metric has changed. So in alignment with what AI is doing, especially when it's moved from SEO to GEO, PR, future ready PR must begin to align whatever measurements they are doing. It's no longer about press clippings, it's no longer about coverage or how many people or how many posts were published, but the organization will want to know, did your sales lead increase after a major press campaign? Now, how many people were driven to our websites? Did we convert anybody to our customers? Did the brand's reputation score improve after a crisis was managed? How many, these are the kind of things that would have kind of use. So nobody is interested in knowing whether you had people following you or not. What these people following you, what are they leading to in the bottom line? Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this point, I'd like to entertain one question from the box. This is from Max from the University of Zambia, and he asks, in an era of AI generated content, the speed of information often outpaces the speed of verification. How can educators, like all of us, shift assessment models to prioritize ethical verification and trust building over mere content production speed? Would anyone want to take this on?
Would you mind repeating that question? That's quite a long one.
Okay, in the era of AI generated content, the speed of information often outpaces the speed of verification. How can educators shift assessment models to prioritize ethical verification and trust building over mere content production speed?
Yeah, maybe I can answer that. And I regard myself as being very privileged in that my teaching is mainly education with executives, so working practitioners. I don't do any exams. I don't do any tests. I don't do any, well, very few written assignments. It's all scenarios. And they have to
Mhm,
work in real time, solving real problems or as real problems within a fixed time scale. That means they have to marshal all their information, they have to do their best to verify it, and they have to come up with an answer to normally quite a complex problem. And then they can be challenged on that. So I think we need to move away from traditional forms of assessment. I think I said in my presentation, to things like scenario-based teaching, to real life cases, real life problems. And I know the education system doesn't lend itself to that. I was very fortunate in I got my master's degree with government validated without any content and without any assessments. And the reason I did that is because the content changes all the time. What matters?
mhm,
We all say what matters is the learning outcomes, and that curricula are evaluated on the learning outcomes. Well, let's put that into practice. How you get to those learning outcomes should be a matter of flexibility as the situations develop. And I think that those complex and scenario-based uh, assessments test far more than any exam and some of the stilted way that we go about our education these days.
Scenario-based assessment. I like that example, and I'd like to dwell on that. No? And I'm going to address this question to the others. Therefore, what is one teaching method that you've already changed because of AI, or other teaching methods that you've incorporated into your class because of the changes that we're seeing today? Yes, go ahead, Professor Marco.
Yeah, Norman, thank you. My students who are attending here would know this, that I've stopped giving the usual assessments and asking them what they know. But basically, the assessments I have designed now is I make them think, make them decide, make them verify, and really like what Professor Gregory has mentioned, no, make it real world based. No,
Yes.
my students who are here in PR management, I designed an exam that's amazing race type. No, it's an exam that you do it in pairs, but you go to the
Mhm.
campus, around the campus, and you see a real world scenario there, and you think about it and apply the peer concepts and principles. So, for example, in the exam, just to give you a quick how I did it, the students went to the food square, and the scenario is just that there's a food poisoning scenario. So the task is they should craft a statement to explain to the community what's going to happen, what is the school going to do. So I made them draft a short social media post and record a short statement. So that's how the tests are going right now. It's not anymore what they memorize and know because they can
Right.
easily AI it. So the test
Exactly.
now is really how I wish I have cameras in all of the stations all over the campus to see how they were doing it. But I had, of course, other eyes there. But it was a very different experience for the students to try it out, and for me also in adapting the types of assessment. It's really now I see many colleagues also struggling because there's a crisis the crisis in making assessments right now because of the tools of AI that can really outplay the teachers who are using the traditional modalities. So what I'm trying to share to colleagues is you need to gamify it also the experience and to change the way we give our assessments.
Hmm. Gamifying the experience is very interesting and mind-opening. Dr. Anka.
Yeah, so I can share a few things that I've changed in both how I conduct classes and in assessment. So, for example, something that I had been doing for a few years and was very useful when we saw AI being more prevalent is actually using service learning as an approach to teaching and to evaluation. So and this is kind of connects to one of the questions in the chat. What do you do when they run to AI, as the default? You make them do it. You make
Yes.
them implement basically what they give you, just as a default with AI. And then you will show them, they will learn on their own, what it is to put, 1,000 people participating in your event. How do you get there? Do you get there with, the AI slop that you generate as a post, or do you find more authentic ways of engagement? And I saw them really realizing, because we can tell them, oh, critical thinking is important, oh, being responsible is important, but until they feel it, it's kind of difficult to discuss about abstract things that we know, but that 18-year-olds or 19-year-olds are find it difficult to understand. And why wouldn't they? It's so easy, to go to AI on the one hand. And on the other hand, and I think this is something that we need to be very aware of as educators, is that the students we're working with now really draw the short stick, with the pandemic. So they were socialized, and they got in contact with social norms and social processes in a very different way than we did. So they understand the reality in a very different way. To that extent, we are privileged, to have developed in a world that was very interactional. So we first need to be aware of the fact that they are not as socialized as we were, or are differently socialized, and then make them become aware on their own. Guide them, kind of put them in front of a mirror of their own practices, and turn AI into something more than a screen that they read and they just copy paste to
Right.
turn an evaluation. And the other thing is that I did switch to written exams, and because it forces them to do two things that they are no longer doing when they are using AI, which is memorize and reflect in order to make sense out of what they are learning. And the other thing is that they don't go to AI to type in even reflection pieces. It's a little bit old school, but because it is so easy to identify information and just to bring it on and not reflect on it, it's a way to do it. I don't know if it's the best way, but it's a way to do it. We'll see how it
Thank
works.
you. Yeah, excellent advice, Dr. Anka. Dr. Nkechi, you've raised your hand.
Yes, I did. Just a little. I'm not a lecturer, so, but I tell my team, try these days to move them from being reactive to being predictive. This is because in those days, all we did was count how many people used how many media mentions and all that. But today, emphasis has shifted from there in my own team. And so what we do today is, how would our action impact on our audience, on our stakeholders? What would they say? What would they do? How would they do it? Okay. So, and I think looking at the Mexican statement of public definition of public relations, we are moving our people from being reactive, like I said, to being predictive, because it's only when you are able to know the consequences or the impacts of whatever campaigns or messages or initiatives that you are having will have on the organization. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like now to address the question of Dr. Fitri, who asks, what is the best method that can be implemented in teaching and learning in order to make students understand that AI is only a tool and cannot replace the human skills, which is important in PR, and extreme dependency on AI is actually a bad practice in PR. So again, um, what can be implemented in teaching and learning in order to make students understand that AI is only a tool?
Maybe I can start on this one and share the experience that I have done in our classes when I teach specifically public relations writing. I think I find it most effective when we together sit down and start using those AI tools in the classroom in real time. So I ask for the prompt from students, we type it in, and we look at it together, and we critique together what the output looks like, whether it's the correct output, whether it addresses the issues that we really need to address. And through that exercise, from multiple prompts and from multiple corrections, and again spitting out the information, and we look together and read it together and asking the questions whether this would work, students realize a lot of times that this draft that it was spit out is far from what it really needs to be before you share. I find that most visible example for our students, because then it also teaches them that you can't take the first spit out of the AI tool and submit it as a paper to me, because they know how I think about what's happening, and they see my thinking as well in real time as everybody else's. So that's my suggestion in terms of how to teach that. Don't be afraid of doing it together with them in the classroom, but also share critiques and engage them in conversations of how it can be improved.
I should do that too, Dr. Katerina. Thank you so much. Dr. Anka, you raised your hand.
Yeah, so it kind of mirrors a little bit what Katerina said. It's to some extent about normalizing the use of AI. And sharing that journey with the students. So a lot of the times when we are talking about, let's say, campaigns, I'm telling them, look, I'm not asking if you used AI, I'm telling that you used AI. Now let's break it down together and see how this aligns with what I asked and with what needs to be done. And we just break apart if each component, and we try to apply critical thinking and see, does this work? Is it specific enough? Does it do ultimately what you want it to do? So basically kind of teach them the critical process that I go through when I evaluate something, because sometimes they really do not have this this set of criteria to apply themselves. So if I make my thinking visible in alignment with AI, and I make this parallel, it does help, and I see the impact that it can have. So that's one thing. And then in the digital writing, that's a difficult class. In the digital writing class that I'm teaching, I'm actually trying to do something else, because of course you cannot, let's see how to write. AI can do that. So what I did, and I've done this for 2 or 3 years now, is I've asked the students to create a persona, or to transform themselves into a persona, a customer persona, let's say, and then give that persona to a colleague, and that colleague would use prompts to write for that persona, but also in the meantime write on their own for that persona. And then as a third layer, ask AI to optimize what they wrote. And then they have these 3 sets of texts,
Right.
and they read them to their colleagues, and their colleagues can give feedback. So that way you can actually get feedback as someone who is developing content from your potential audience. And sometimes they select AI, sometimes they select the optimized version. I'm getting a little bit alarmed here, because in the beginning, in the first year, all of them chose the human version. This year some of them chose the AI version, some of them chose the optimized version. None of them chose the human version.
Wow.
I think this is also a very good way to see where AI is and where the audience is in relation to AI, and help them understand that transition and that transformation. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Anka. Dr. Marco?
Thank you, Norman. AI cannot establish a real relationship.
Mhm.
It's only us, human to human. It can facilitate, it can help you, but it cannot really, do real media relations. It can help you do media relations, but for you to establish and reach out and meet real media practitioners, AI cannot do that. It has to be the person. So in my class, one of the things I do as an exercise is I make students create a calling card. Then on the front side, it's their current state. On the flip side, their ideal profession or practice in the future. And then we do role playing. Um, Sometimes in the context of different multicultural settings. Because as we now live in a global society, in a globalized society, they can meet people from all walks of life in different parts of the world. They have to know also the norms of how to do business communication and to negotiate and to talk with people from different cultures. So I make them role play and assume that they're from different countries, and we together learn about the etiquette and practices of business communication. That's essential also in establishing a relationship with stakeholders and partners. So to me, again, the tools are there, but it cannot replace human relationship, the way we establish relationships. Thank you.
Wonderful. No, so many creative ways of trying to, harnessing this power and trying to involve our students to experience AI and make the best of it. I'd like to take on this next question that was sent in anonymously. Any specific AI tool that you would like to highly recommend to the teachers or school owners, students, businessmen, and media? Anyone?
Sorry, you're just fading out there, actually, Norman. Could you just repeat that question? Your voice faded towards the end then.
Okay, any specific AI tool that you would like to highly recommend to teachers or school owners or even students? Dr. Nkachi.
Well, it all depends on what. I mean, these days I have found in the past 1 month, I have found Claude very useful. So it depends on your needs. I find Gemini and the rest very well. I wouldn't say mature, but I know that most of these tools, these AI tools, is always better to get the professional aspect of it. A lot of people use the free side of it, and so they don't get much out of it. But quite honestly, I think I will recommend Claude for deep work. Perplexity is okay if you're doing a very light material, but for research, I prefer Claude. And then when I want to do a marketing, I use mostly Jasper. And let me also put in here, we should not be ashamed to use AI. I mean, AI is a tool that has been developed to partner with us and help us, especially those of us who do a lot of research. It's removing a lot of burden from us. And so we must be transparent when we use it, but we must, like I say, know the right tools to use. Some people use Gemini, which I don't use because I think it doesn't give me the depth of the work I want to do. And then, of course, for people who like to do their research in their WhatsApp, I know the Copilot helps. But for research, deep research, Claude is okay for me. And for marketing, I use Jasper. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question here specifically for Dr. Anne.
Are you muted? Can't hear you.
Can you hear me? Yes? There's a question for Dr. Anne, and it goes this way. The phrase, just because we can doesn't mean we should, feels like it could actually become a North Star for how we teach ethics in an AI era, do you see it becoming a kind of professional compass that could only or that could unify the field globally? Let me say that once again for Dr. Anne. Uh,
Well, I guess in many ways that's the definition of ethics, isn't it? We could do
yes.
anything, but should you? Is the question really? And what thinking process do you go through in order to make judgments about whether or not you should? Professor Marco and I referred to the UNESCO Code on Responsible AI. Anka and I live in the, well, I don't anymore, but I'm in Europe in a way. There's the European AI Act that has its own set of ethics, and documents like that. NGA has produced its own responsible AI code as well, which is a sort of pared down version of some of those others. And I think that there is a coalescence around certain things about ethics, which I think are important around issues of transparency and issues of data privacy and how do you protect against bias, but also more profound issues about fairness. And you were just asking then about tools that we would recommend. And a lot of the tools are developed in the West. And I'm thinking about, you know, the appropriateness of using them, given the data sets they're trained on in the West as well, whether or not they're entirely appropriate for other parts of the world. So this question of ethics goes into everything that we do. But I would recommend things like the UNESCO principles and the AI Act underpinning ethical principles, which are really comprehensive but relatively simple. The AI Act, for example, is based on 6 ethical principles, which are based around our universal human rights, really. So it's a rights-based document. And I think that that's the thing we need to remember, just bringing the conversation back. At the end of AI are human beings. And the way we use it has impact on human beings. And the way that we use it defines us as a human being and betrays our own ethics and values. And therefore, you know, keeping it focused on the human and recognizing that the human helps us answer the question, just because I can, should I? And if it's to the benefit of human beings, then that's a nice general guide. You'll need to do much more thinking about it. But if it's going to cause harm, no, you shouldn't, even if you can. So it's a nice little phrase just to give you a pointer. And just as Professor Tsetura was saying, you know, the first question should be ethics. That's a nice way to start that ethics discussion. Just because I can do this, should I?
Wonderful. There's one question directed towards Dr. Katerina, and it goes this way. As a student, I noticed that AI tools can generate messages that look transparent and authentic, even when they're not fully honest. From your research on trust and transparency, how can we as future PR practitioners make sure we're not just creating the illusion of trust, but actually building real credibility in an AI-driven environment?
Well, when the students ask questions like this, I always say the future is bright, because that means
Yes.
that you are thinking, that means you are doing exactly what we've been talking about here, that you critically assess everything that comes your way. This is a very important question, and as a scholar of transparency and understanding how transparency affects our trust and relationship building, I'd say understanding the source and really making sure to understand and explain to yourself as well as to others what's the reason behind certain outputs is very important. Who says this, for what reason, who makes choices that they make. And we need to remember that AI tools also just very big black boxes in many ways. We do not know all the details of the algorithms of how they work. And the truth is, even the developers to the extent really do not know why certain responses happen in one way, and the exact same prompt can generate a different response another time. So for thinking about authenticity and transparency, I think it's very important for us to think about and ask questions. Who says what and for what purpose? Take whatever you get with the help of AI, read it, and reflect on this as a human being, as the professional, humans first. I very much like the global framework Dr. Marco Polo presented, where you emphasize at the very end that humans really need to drive that conversation. And so the way to authenticity, the way to transparency is to disclose that this may have been generated with AI, but also mention and emphasize that it has been human focus driven, resized if you wish, or adjusted as needed. And we as human beings, I think, appreciate always the live conversation, the realness of our discussions and interactions. And whenever we can insert that realness is when we really can start building our trustworthy, transparent relationships.
Thank you very much, Dr. Katerina. We are now approaching our 2 hour mark. It's been a long event so far. So I do have one final question for all of you before I turn the floor over to Giselle. And it's rather simple, but I'd like all of you to weigh in on this. How can academia stay current in a field that's evolving too fast? Because while there is AI now, there will be more technologies later on, and we will keep on adapting and shifting. So, in your perspective, how can we stay current in such an evolving field as communications is? Go ahead, Dr. Ngechi. I think
For
you're on
me,
mute.
it's very simple. I mean, we'll keep on scaling, and we must accept the fact that AI has come to be, and we must also identify tools, especially tools for verification. Because if you look at the bot amplified analysis, you find that while the real narratives are there, the negative ones are almost taking them over. All right, so we must develop tools that will also help us to authenticate some of these narratives. And we must not also, I mean, like some scholars I know, they are very ashamed to say, oh, I used AI. That's not what you say AI was. So we're going forward, we must encourage people to use AI, be fluent in AI, but be able to know that wisdom must be applied. And at the end of the day, you are the one that makes the final judgment. That's the little I'll have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marco.
In brief, I will paraphrase Alvin Toffler. We must be willing to learn, relearn, and unlearn.
Yeah.
And still, we must be the most advanced technology in the room.
Right.
We must be willing to learn, relearn, and unlearn. Thank you.
Well said.
Maybe I'll
Yes,
jump
Dr.
in
Katerina.
here.
Yes.
Thank you. And we'll follow what Dr. Polo said, that co-creational perspective, co-construction of that knowledge happens in the classroom. I think that's the most important thing. When you engage in conversations with the students and you together discuss the most challenging, most complex issues and difficulties and problems that we all face today. And when they see you thinking through those and explaining your understanding of those issues and phenomena, I think students appreciate it much more. And so I would encourage us to keep that in mind, that sharing our perspectives, our ways of thinking, and explaining why we think in certain ways really help us shape up the learning process and co-construct the knowledge together.
Excellent. Maybe Dr. Anka, and then we close with Dr. Ann.
Yeah. So Look, I know that AI is now, all the rage, but it's nothing new. We've always had technologies,
Mm.
coming up. This is, and of course I'm generalizing, but this is a very, 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 very fancy autocorrect, right? So w- I don't think that mastering the autocorrect is necessarily at the core, but I think that it's important to understand what exactly it's correcting and how we come up with the context in which we integrate that autocorrect, right? So it's still us, it's still humans. It will change. It will be at some point a mess. It's already is, geopolitically. It's all happening, at the same time. We will get over it in a form or another, but I do think that it's important to remember that it's still humans, but that humans are very different. So for me, one of the main challenges right now, when it comes to my students, is actually trying to align as much as possible communication thinking with business thinking. Because if I'm only focusing on what communication students are thinking about AI, and not focusing on how business students, their future, managers or CEOs are doing with AI, and how they understand ethics and empathy, which I think are the two main things that we need to teach. Well, critical thinking too, of course. Then we are in a little bit of an impasse. So I do think that those are things that we need to take into consideration. It's very difficult because when teaching business students, it's a little bit more. It's a different context, right?
Right.
So things that I find problematic from a communication perspective, I get answers from business students that they don't find problematic, and that in itself is problematic, you know. So I don't know, it's the same. Just manage the autocorrect, and we'll see where it goes. I mean, it's fun. It's a new adventure. It's a new journey, right?
Manage the autocorrect. There you go, Dr. Anne.
I think it's a challenge that everybody faces. How do we keep current? Practitioners face it as well when the pace of change is so quick. So make good friends with people who are at the forefront of the technology is my hint. And I've got some practitioner friends who are great in this. And it speaks to the point about us, we're in this together. So the academic and the practitioner community need to come closer and closer. We have shared interests in this and we need to work together on that. A couple of other things. I think we need to, as educators, to learn our own lesson about standing back and look at the bigger picture. Because when we say keeping up, we normally means tools and tactics rather than what's happening here. What's the big picture here? And for me, I would challenge the thinking that AI is just a tool. I don't think it is. I think it's a stakeholder that is actually changing the reality around us. And I think that's part of the contribution that academics can make to do that standing back and say to practitioners, together, let's think about these bigger things and how do practitioners behave and fight and operate in order to change the direction in the way that things are done. And I think one thing that we could do in the classroom more, apart from changing our teaching, is also teach, and this is one thing that I insist on, the skills of reflection, to stand back and think about what's going on, what's right, what's wrong, what's important, what isn't important, what's passing, what's a definite shift in the way that society is working. And so those three things really, it's difficult to keep up to make good friends. Stand back and see what's happening. And I think there's a shift in AI from tool to stakeholder and beyond to a shaper of reality, and then the need for reflection. And those are the things I think that will keep us safe as a community of interest, practitioners and academics together, because we all have a passion for this subject of public relations.
Wonderful. I've learned so much from all of you today. And there are so many questions still in the Q&A box, but we will be sending these questions to all of you in this panel so that you may answer, especially those that are directed specifically to you. But this event has been a wonderful experience for me, and I'm sure for all of those who've participated today. Such a rich discussion, and discussed by so many passionate doctors like you all. So thank you for being with us today. And I turn you over to Giselle for more.
Thank you so much, Norman, and thank you to all our distinguished speakers for your thoughtful and valuable contributions. I'm so overwhelmed with 28, almost 30 questions, and definitely would like to, the records will be available, the video recording. And Mateus, I think also the materials will also be available. Either we send it to your email, or if not, please visit the Global Alliance website. So we would be posting also some of the materials that our speakers had presented tonight. And we are also very grateful to those who showed up, the 460 something, showed up joining our webinars. And I'm pretty sure that you really had a very insightful sharing session tonight. And I would like also to again encourage everyone that as we continue the GAETDM 2026, I am looking forward to welcoming you again at our cap-off webinar on 30 April 2026. We will continue this conversation from the perspective of professional practice, with a focus again on trust, responsible AI, and measurable income. So thank you once again for joining us for 2 solid hours. And I'll see you again on the 30th April. Good evening, and we hope to see you again. Bye.